Hello and welcome to the Cross-Regional Professional Learning Programme to support the realisation of the Curriculum for Wales. This is the programme for head teachers and senior leaders. What I wanted to set out in this brief introductory video is a context for the programme and provide a bit of an understanding of the structure, why we've structured the programme in the way that we have, and how this relates to the wider system expectations that are due to be published in October 2020. One of the first things that we reflected on during the live sessions this week was around the current context, and the current context being very disruptive, and the fact that we know that at present schools are having significant challenges in terms of the operational nature of work, and at the moment very difficult to think more strategically about some of the work. But the hope was that some of the tools and some of the thinking that was in the leading and managing change session would be helpful in providing a bit of a reflection and maybe some support through this time. We also, from feedback from practitioners, know that people value the opportunity to network, share and problem solve in the current context. So we felt that it was important to provide that opportunity. Our next key consideration was the Shared Expectations document that was developed in partnership with Estyn and Welsh Government with the regional consortia, where we sought to set out what we felt the journey for Curriculum for Wales should look like between the publication of the curriculum in January 2020 and the requirement for all schools to be enacting the new curriculum from nursery through to year 7 by September 2022. That document is due to be published in March. Our expectations now is that it will be published this month in October 2020, and has been revised to take into account both current conditions in terms of what's happened through the pandemic, but also to realign some of those expectations relative to the original timescales that were set out. So the shared expectations are set out in 3 distinct phases. The first phase being an engagement phase. It's absolutely crucial during the first phase of engagement that all of our leaders and all of our teachers and those supporting teaching understand the new curriculum model, which is very different, as we know, from the existing national curriculum model. So that's crucially important. Before any designing, planning and trialling is done in terms of the new framework, which is the second phase of development, and then what we need to ensure that we're doing as we do our designing, trialling and planning is to ensure that we appropriately evaluate the approaches we've taken to prepare for that first teaching from September 2022. What we've tried to do in terms of the cross-regional programme to support the realisation of Curriculum for Wales is we've tried to align the professional learning support set against these shared expectations to ensure that we provide the professional learning that schools require at the time when it best suits the school, and also how that then aligns to the shared expectations document. So in the first instance here, in the engagement phase, I've already mentioned it's important to understand the model, so we'll have some professional learning assets to support an understanding of the Curriculum for Wales model, which will be available through the next month or so. It's clearly important that we have a shared vision for what the curriculum should look like in our schools, what teaching and learning should look like to support that. And it's also important that we think about how we can make time and space for professional learning, especially given our current context. In terms of designing, planning and trialling phase, through the second part of the autumn term and then through the early part of the spring term, we'll be providing some thinking around the research that underpins planning for curriculum change and collaborative approaches to curriculum design. So some curriculum theory, but also then how schools are starting to engage with that in practice and share some examples to support thinking about how we move towards the new curriculum. Now, it's obviously really important that in terms of that work, we underpin this with a culture of research and inquiry. And I know that we've got many of our professional learning schools who are currently developing inquiry-based approaches to thinking about the way they design their curriculum. It's important that we share that learning, and it's also important that we disseminate those approaches across all schools so everyone's got that opportunity to think about how we can use inquiry as a supportive mechanism to support curriculum development. And why did we start with leading change? Well, we thought it was really important that to ensure that we make smooth progress through these shared expectations over the next couple of years, that we lead change in the most effective way possible, based on what we know of how people experience change and how we can support them through those changes. So the next important question then would be, why are those shared expectations so important? I thought this model that I'd taken from Michael Funn and Lyle Kirkman's book Coherent School Leadership was quite helpful in providing a bit of a framework to support our thinking. So in the first instance, communication is obviously key. Those shared expectations will be communicated by Welsh Government in the next couple of weeks, and I think set out in a fairly clear format. But it's obviously important then that everyone across the system has an opportunity to make sense of those. Therefore, one of the things that we need to do is to provide an opportunity to create a shared understanding around that document, so that people have the opportunity to come and ask questions and to make sense of that journey from where we are now to September 2022. The next part of the cycle then is that those shared expectations create a degree of predictability in terms of the different behaviours that operate across the system. So from our perspective in the region, how will we support you to realise those shared expectations through professional learning and advice? And from your perspective as school leaders, how will you develop staff understanding of those expectations aligned to the timescales that have been set out, albeit in a time that we know is got a degree of unpredictability about it, and therefore a degree of flexibility will need to be afforded to doing that work. In the next phase then, which Fullen and Kirkman have called the trust and shared commitment stage, it's about that distribution of responsibility and sort of that collective accountability to complete those tasks. So, for example, it's important that all staff understand the curriculum framework. From our perspective in the ES, we need to ensure that we provide the right professional learning support to support you in achieving that. And from your perspective, it's about then making sure that all practitioners have that common understanding, and also the opportunities to discuss and make sense of the curriculum framework. And the last part of the diagram there is that idea of us working as a team. So within the region, we need to make sure that our staff have a common understanding of the expectations and the approaches that need to be taken for us to successfully realise the new curriculum, and also so that we can provide a consistent level of support and common messages to support you in schools. And also from your perspective then, it's about making sure that your teams have a common understanding of those expectations and approaches too. So the next obvious question is, what does this programme look like? Well, if we just have a look at the key headings, the key themes that we're going to discuss, they do align to those expectations that we've discussed. So the leading change workshops of the first part of those have taken place, and the recordings are available now through this professional learning asset. Part 2 then is taking place on the 14th of October. The next phase, that idea of establishing a shared vision, we'll be doing some work around that, looking at how we can achieve that, and also some examples of how schools have developed their thinking, particularly in light of the new curriculum, on the 11th of November. We'll have a session then around making time and space for professional learning, look at some different models and different approaches on the 4th of December. We'll have some leading pedagogy assets that will be made available through the second half of the autumn term too, and again we're looking to provide a mixture of some live delivery and also all of the assets being available on demand when you need them. And then in terms of the two big curriculum design development units, planning for curriculum change and collaborative approaches to curriculum design, we'll be designing those assets to make them available through the second half of the autumn term, with the anticipation that we can make some live workshops available during the spring term. So that's the plan as we currently see it. So talking about this professional learning asset and the other ones that will follow, here's the sorts of things we're going to provide for you. So the first thing that we will provide is a recording of the live professional learning session. So all of the live sessions or webinars that we produce will be recorded so that you can view them at a time that best suits you, or use them with staff at a time that best suits you. The PowerPoint presentations with any presenters' notes that we've made will also be made available, so that you can run the workshop as you wish, or take the bits from the various presentations that you feel are most suited to your context. The participant handbooks that we now use through most of our professional learning sessions will be made available to you, so that you have the opportunities with your teams to reflect and develop people's understanding as we move through time. And then also any of the external links to YouTube clips or some of the links to the wider reading will also be made available, with the idea that can help to support facilitation of professional learning and deepening staff understanding of some of those key things that we are discussing. So that brings a conclusion to this introductory section. Through the rest of this playlist now will be all of the materials from part 1 of the change management workshop for senior leaders.